Lena Brooks stood in her designer kitchen that Tuesday morning, staring at the man she'd married 12 years ago, and said the words that would change everything. I could replace you in 24 hours. The declaration hung in the air like poison. Ethan Cole, father, husband, fool, felt something crack inside his chest, but his face stayed blank. No shouting, no pleading. He simply set down his coffee mug, grabbed his jacket, and walked out the door. What Lena didn't know was that her husband had already been planning his exit for months. What Ethan didn't know was that by tonight she'd be on her knees begging him to stay. And what neither of them realized was that sometimes the end of a marriage is actually the beginning. If you want to see how far love can fall before it finally fights back, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The kitchen smelled like expensive coffee and quiet resentment. Ethan Cole stood at the marble counter, watching his wife scroll through her phone with the kind of focus she used to reserve for him. Lena Brooks, she'd kept her maiden name, a decision that felt symbolic now, didn't even glance up when he poured his second cup. Her silk robe, the one he'd bought her last Christmas, hung open just enough to remind him of everything they used to be. I was thinking we could try that new Italian place tonight, Ethan said, keeping his voice casual. The one on 7th. I made a reservation. Lena's thumb paused mid-scroll. Tonight? Yeah, just us. She finally looked up, and Ethan saw it, that flicker of annoyance she thought she was hiding. I have drinks with Madison and Claire. I told you last week. You didn't. I did, Ethan. You just don't listen. She went back to her phone, dismissing him with practiced efficiency. He'd been keeping track. She hadn't mentioned it, but arguing would only make him look desperate, so he nodded and dumped his coffee into the sink. The dark liquid swirled down the drain like every conversation they'd had in the past 3 years. Fine, he said. Don't do that. Do what? That thing where you pretend everything's fine when you're actually sulking. Lena set her phone down with a sharp click against the marble. You're so passive-aggressive lately. Ethan turned slowly, studying the woman he'd married in a courthouse ceremony because she'd said big weddings were wasteful. Back then, her practicality had seemed refreshing. Now, it just felt cold. I suggested dinner, he said quietly. That's not passive-aggressive. That's called trying. Trying? Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ethan, you've been trying for months, making reservations I never asked for, suggesting therapy like I'm broken, hovering around like I'm some project you need to fix. Maybe because our marriage is broken. The words came out harder than he'd intended, but he didn't take them back. Lena's eyes narrowed. Our marriage is fine, she said. You're the one who suddenly decided we need to be attached at the hip. I have a life, Ethan. Friends, a career. I can't just drop everything because you're feeling needy. Something shifted in Ethan's chest. Not anger, not even hurt anymore. Just a cold, settling certainty. Right, he said. Your career. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Forget it. But Lena was already standing, her robe falling open as she crossed her arms. No, say it. You clearly have something to say. Ethan looked at her, really looked. When had she started wearing that much makeup just to sit around the house? When had her smile become something she rationed like a limited resource? When had he become the enemy in his own home? I just think it's interesting, he said carefully, that you have time for drinks with Madison and Claire twice a week, time for your yoga classes and your book club and your weekend spa trips, but you can't spare 2 hours for dinner with your husband. Lena's face flushed. Are you seriously keeping tabs on me? I'm not keeping tabs. I'm just noticing that I'm at the bottom of your priority list. That's not fair, isn't it? Ethan moved closer, and Lena took a step back. When's the last time we had sex, Lena? When's the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about bills or schedules? When's the last time you looked at me like you actually wanted me here? Her mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, Ethan thought he saw something crack in her perfect facade. Guilt, maybe, or recognition, but then her jaw tightened. You want honesty? She said. Fine. You're suffocating me, Ethan. All this neediness, this constant pressure to be the wife you think I should be. It's exhausting. Maybe if you spent less time obsessing over our relationship and more time being someone interesting, I wouldn't need to find my life outside this house. The words hit him like a physical blow, but what shocked him more was how calmly he absorbed them. Someone interesting, he repeated. Yes. Lena's voice had gone cold now, clinical. When we met, you had ambitions. You talked about starting your own firm, traveling, building something. Now you're just comfortable, safe, boring. Ethan felt himself nodding, like he was in a meeting discussing quarterly reports instead of having his entire existence dismantled. Boring. I didn't mean... No, you're right. He set his empty mug in the sink with careful precision. I became boring. I got comfortable. I thought providing a stable home and a decent life was enough. My mistake. Lena's expression shifted, uncertainty creeping in. Ethan, you know what's funny? He turned back to her, and something in his eyes made her take another step back. I actually believed we could fix this. I thought if I just tried harder, planned better dates, suggested counseling, reminded you of who we used to be, I thought I could save us. We don't need saving. But here's what I finally figured out this morning, Ethan continued, his voice steady and terrifyingly calm. You can't save something the other person has already decided to let die. The kitchen went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Lena's face had gone pale. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done trying to convince you to want your own marriage. That's not fair. You're twisting my words. Am I? Ethan grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. Because from where I'm standing, you just made it pretty clear that I'm the problem. Too needy, too boring, too desperate for the woman I married to actually give a damn about me. Ethan, stop. Lena moved toward him, but he stepped back. You're being dramatic. I never said I didn't care. You didn't have to. He pulled on his jacket, his movements slow and deliberate. You say it every time you choose literally anything else over spending time with me. You say it every time you look at me like I'm an inconvenience. You say it every time I suggest we try to reconnect, and you treat it like I'm asking you to donate a kidney. Lena's hands trembled slightly. Where are you going? Out. We're not done talking. Yes, we are. Ethan picked up his keys, and the jangle of metal felt like a starting gun. Because I just realized something, Lena. You said I'm boring and needy and suffocating. Fine. You want someone more interesting? Someone who doesn't need you so much? He met her eyes, and for the first time in years, she saw something she didn't recognize in them. Go find him. Lena's breath caught. What? You heard me. Ethan's voice stayed level, almost gentle. If you think you can replace me in 24 hours, prove it. The words landed like a grenade in the pristine kitchen. Lena's mouth dropped open. I never said that. You didn't have to say it out loud. Ethan opened the front door, letting in a gust of cold October air. But we both know you've been thinking it, so here's your chance. Go ahead. Replace me. Find someone less boring, less needy, more worthy of the incredible Lena Brooks. You're being insane. Maybe. He paused in the doorway, looking back at the woman he'd spent 12 years loving. Or maybe I'm finally being honest. You want space? You've got it. All the space you need. Ethan, don't walk out that door. Why not? He smiled, and it was the saddest thing she'd ever seen. You already did. The door closed behind him with a soft click that echoed through the suddenly enormous house. Lena stood frozen in the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. She'd expected him to argue, to apologize, to try harder like he always did. Not this, not calm acceptance, not that terrible final smile. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands. No calls, no texts, nothing but the reflection of her own face in the dark screen, looking lost in a way she didn't recognize. Ethan made it to his car before his hands started shaking. He sat in the driveway of the house he'd been paying the mortgage on for 8 years, gripping the steering wheel hard enough to hurt. His breath came fast and shallow, and for a moment he thought he might actually cry. But then something else rose up through the panic, something cold and clear and surprisingly steady. Relief. He'd said it, finally. After months of swallowing his pride, making excuses for her behavior, telling himself it was just a rough patch, he'd finally stopped pretending. His phone buzzed, a text from his business partner, Marcus. Meeting moved to 10. You good? Ethan stared at the message. Marcus didn't know. Nobody knew how bad things had gotten at home. Ethan had been too ashamed to admit that his marriage was circling the drain while everyone else seemed to have their lives together. He typed back, I'm good, see you at 10. The lie came easily. He'd been practicing it for years. Ethan started the car and backed out of the driveway, watching the house shrink in his rearview mirror. Lena's silhouette was visible through the kitchen window, phone pressed to her ear. Calling Madison, probably, or Claire. Someone who would tell her she was right, that Ethan was overreacting, that men were all the same. Letter. He drove with no destination in mind, just away. The suburbs gave way to the city, then the city gave way to the highway. His phone buzzed repeatedly. Texts from Lena, each one more frantic than the last. Where are you? We need to talk. You're being childish. Ethan, answer me. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Please come home. He turned the phone face down on the passenger seat and kept driving. But by the time Lena's hand stopped shaking enough to dial Madison's number, it was nearly 10 o'clock. Hey, girl. Madison's voice was bright, oblivious. Ready for tonight? Claire's already here. We're pre-gaming with those raspberry cosmos you love. I need you to come over, Lena said. The brightness vanished. What's wrong? Just, can you come over, please? 30 minutes later, Madison and Claire were sitting on Lena's pristine white couch, watching her pace the living room like a caged animal. He just left, Lena said for the third time. He just walked out. Madison exchanged a glance with Claire. Okay, back up. What exactly happened? Lena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the house being set to a comfortable 72 degrees. We were talking about dinner. He wanted to go out. I had plans with you guys, and it just escalated. What did he say? Claire asked gently. Claire was the quiet one, the therapist friend who actually listened. He said I don't prioritize him, that I'm always choosing other things over our marriage. Lena's voice cracked. He said I already walked out, so he was just making it official. That's manipulative, Madison said immediately. He's trying to guilt you into canceling your plans, into giving up your life. Is he wrong, though? Claire interrupted. Madison shot her a look. Excuse me? I'm just asking. Claire's voice stayed soft, but her eyes were sharp as they focused on Lena. When's the last time you and Ethan spent quality time together? Lena's mouth opened and closed. We live together. We spend time together every day. That's not what I asked. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and damning. This is ridiculous, Madison said, standing. Lena has every right to have her own life. Just because she's married doesn't mean she has to be joined at the hip with her husband. This is exactly the kind of controlling behavior that… Madison. Lena's voice was barely a whisper. He's not controlling. He's just tired. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Claire leaned forward. Tired of what? Of trying. Lena sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Of being the only one who wants to save this. But that's not true, Madison protested. You love Ethan. Do I? The question escaped before Lena could stop it. She looked at her friends, these women who'd been her lifeline for the past 2 years, and felt something crack open inside her chest. I mean, I did. I do. But when did it become so hard? When did being married to him start feeling like work instead of… Instead of what? Claire prompted. Instead of home. The words landed like stones. Madison sat back down, her expression softer now. Honey, all marriages go through rough patches. This doesn't mean… He told me to replace him, Lena said suddenly. He said if I thought I could find someone better, I should go ahead and try. Claire's eyebrows rose. He said that? Not in those exact words, but yes. Lena pulled a throw pillow against her chest, needing something to hold. He was so calm about it, Mads. That's what scared me. He wasn't angry or hurt or even sad. He was just done. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. All three women looked at it. Unknown number. Hey, beautiful. Still on for drinks tonight? Can't wait to see you. Jay. The message sat there like evidence at a crime scene. Who's Jay? Claire's voice had gone very quiet. Lena's face drained of color. I'm not... Lena. Madison's voice had lost its warmth. Who is Jay? Jamie. From the gym. Lena grabbed her phone, deleting the message with trembling fingers. It's nothing. We just talk sometimes. He's friendly. He thinks you have plans with him tonight, Claire said flatly. I don't. I told him maybe drinks with friends. He must have misunderstood. Did you tell Ethan about Jamie? Madison asked. The silence was answer enough. Claire stood up slowly, gathering her purse. I think you need to figure out what you actually want, Lena, because from where I'm sitting, your husband isn't the one who walked out. You did. You've been walking out for months, maybe years. He just finally stopped following you. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. Claire's voice stayed gentle, but her words cut deep. But marriage is work, real work. And you can't complain about Ethan not fighting for you when you've been testing how far you can push him before he breaks. She headed for the door, leaving Madison and Lena staring at each other in the wreckage of the perfect evening they'd planned. Is she right? Lena whispered. Madison wanted to say no, wanted to defend her friend, to blame Ethan for his neediness, his suffocating attention, his inability to just let Lena breathe. But she thought about her own marriage, the one that had ended 2 years ago, about how she'd blamed her ex for everything, his long hours, his lack of romance, his failure to make her feel special, and how she'd realized, too late, that she'd been so busy looking for what was missing that she'd forgotten to appreciate what was there. I don't know, Madison said finally, but I think you need to decide what you're really afraid of losing, your freedom or your husband. Yet, Ethan ended up at his brother's apartment on the other side of the city. Daniel opened the door in sweatpants and a faded college t-shirt, took one look at Ethan's face, and stepped aside without a word. Beer's in the fridge, Daniel said, heading back to the couch where a basketball game was playing on mute. You look like hell. Thanks. Ethan grabbed 2 bottles, handed one to his brother, and collapsed into the armchair that had seen better days. Lena and I had a fight. Yeah, I gathered that from the fact that you're here at 10:30 on a Tuesday instead of home with your wife. Daniel took a long drink, his eyes never leaving his brother's face. Want to talk about it? Not really. Okay. They sat in silence, watching grown men chase a ball up and down a court, and Ethan felt something in his chest start to loosen. This was what he'd needed. No questions, no judgment, just presence. I told her to replace me, he said after a while. Daniel's beer stopped halfway to his mouth. You what? She basically said I was boring and needy, so I told her if she could find someone better, she should go for it. Jesus Christ, Ethan. What? Ethan looked at his brother. You think I'm wrong? I think you're an idiot. Daniel set down his beer with deliberate care. But I also think you've been dying inside for the past year and nobody wanted to acknowledge it. The observation hit harder than Ethan expected. That obvious? To me? Yeah. Daniel turned off the TV, giving Ethan his full attention. You stopped coming to Sunday dinners. You stopped talking about anything except work. The few times I've seen you and Lena together, you looked like strangers who were just really good at pretending. We were good once, Ethan said quietly. We were really good. I remember. Daniel's voice softened. You were crazy about each other. But Ethan, that was 12 years ago. People change. Sometimes they change together. Sometimes they don't. So what, I'm just supposed to give up? I didn't say that. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But I am saying that you can't force someone to want what you want. If Lena's checked out, if she's built a whole life that doesn't include you, at some point you have to ask yourself if you're fighting for your marriage or just fighting to avoid admitting it's over. The words settled like stones in Ethan's stomach. I love her, he said. I know you do. Daniel's expression was sympathetic but honest. But does she love you? Not the idea of being married, not the comfort of the life you've built. Does she actually love you? Ethan didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because somewhere in the past few years he'd stopped believing the answer was yes. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Lena. I'm sorry, please come home. We need to talk. He stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. What do you want to do? Daniel asked. Ethan thought about the look on Lena's face when he'd walked out. The shock. The confusion. But underneath it, had there been relief? Had some part of her been grateful for the permission to stop pretending? I don't know, he said finally. For the first time in 12 years, I genuinely have no idea what comes next. Daniel reached over and gripped his shoulder. Then maybe that's okay. Maybe not knowing is the first honest thing you've felt in a long time. They sat there as the night deepened outside. Two brothers in a cramped apartment, while across the city a woman sat alone in a perfect house, finally understanding what she was about to lose. By midnight, Lena had cried off all her makeup and drunk half a bottle of wine. Madison had left around 11, after extracting a promise that Lena wouldn't do anything stupid or dramatic. But sitting alone in the dark living room, Lena wasn't sure what qualified as stupid anymore. She picked up her phone for the 100th time, staring at her last message to Ethan. I'm sorry, please come home. We need to talk. Read at 11:47 p.m. No response. The read receipt felt like a knife. He'd seen it. He'd chosen not to answer. Her phone buzzed with a new message, and her heart leaped. But it wasn't Ethan. Jamie. Hey, you never answered about tonight. Everything okay? Lena stared at the message, her wine-fogged brain struggling to process the surreal irony. Here was a man who wanted her attention, who texted her good morning and asked about her day and made her feel interesting. And all she could think about was her husband's empty side of the bed. She typed back, I'm married, Jamie. I shouldn't have given you the wrong impression. Please don't message me again. She hit send before she could second-guess it, then blocked the number for good measure. One problem solved. 100 more to go. Lena walked through the house, seeing it with new eyes. The expensive furniture she'd insisted on. The pristine white walls that Ethan had wanted to paint, but she'd vetoed. The guest room that had become his office because she'd claimed she needed the master bedroom's closet space. When had she become this person? This woman who kept score, who hoarded space and time and affection like they were finite resources she might run out of. She found herself in Ethan's office, sitting at his desk. His laptop was still open, the screen dark but the power light glowing. She knew his password. They'd promised no secrets early in their marriage. How many promises had they broken? She tapped the keyboard, and the screen flickered to life. His email was open, and the subject line of the draft message at the top made her blood run cold. Attorney referrals. Uncontested divorce. The email was dated 3 weeks ago. Unsent, but written. Lena's hand shook as she clicked it open. Marcus, I need some recommendations for family law attorneys. Nothing contested, nothing ugly, just someone who can handle the paperwork cleanly. I'd appreciate your discretion on this. He'd been planning this. For weeks. While she'd been complaining about his neediness, his desperate attempts to connect, he'd been preparing to leave. And she'd given him every reason to do it. Lena closed the laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes, but the tears came anyway. Not pretty crying, not dignified grief, ugly, choking sobs that shook her whole body. She'd lost him. Not today, not with one fight. She'd lost him slowly, deliberately, through 1,000 small cuts of indifference and neglect and casual cruelty. And the worst part? She hadn't even noticed until it was too late. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from Claire. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you actually want. Not what's comfortable or easy or safe. What you actually want. The rest will follow. Lena read it 3 times, then looked around the perfect house she'd built, the perfect life she'd curated, and realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd actually wanted any of it. Lena woke up on the couch at 3 in the morning with a splitting headache and mascara streaked down her face. The wine bottle sat empty on the coffee table, judging her. Her phone was clutched in her hand, the screen displaying her unanswered messages to Ethan like a monument to her failure. She sat up slowly, the room spinning slightly. The house felt different in the dark, bigger, emptier, like it was holding its breath. She needed water, aspirin, a time machine. In the kitchen, she filled a glass from the tap and caught sight of her reflection in the window. She looked like hell. Hair matted on one side, eyes swollen, still wearing the silk robe that had started this whole nightmare. Had it really only been 17 hours since Ethan walked out? She drank the water in gulps, then refilled the glass and drank that too. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and her heart jumped, but it was just a notification from her meditation app reminding her to start her day with mindfulness. The irony was almost funny. She opened her messages again, scrolling through the thread with Ethan. Their last real conversation before today had been 4 days ago. Ethan, need anything from the store? Lena, we're good, that was it, that was what they'd become. Roommates who occasionally shared a bed and split the bills. Her thumb hovered over the call button. It was 3 a.m. He was probably asleep at Daniel's, or maybe still awake, staring at his own phone, wondering if she was worth coming back to. She pressed call before she could talk herself out of it. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then his voice, rough with sleep. Lena, I'm sorry, she said immediately. I know it's late. I needed to hear your voice. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm listening. Not, it's okay. Not, I miss you too. Just listening. Lena's throat tightened. I've been sitting here all night trying to figure out when we broke. When I broke us. And I keep going back further and further, and I can't find the exact moment, and that's what's killing me, Ethan. Because if I can't find it, I can't fix it. Some things don't break all at once, Ethan said quietly. They crack. Little fractures you don't notice until the whole thing comes apart in your hands. Is that what happened to us? I think so. Lena pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. I found your email. The one about divorce attorneys. She heard him exhale. You went through my computer. I know, I'm sorry. But Ethan, 3 weeks? You've been planning to leave for 3 weeks and you didn't say anything? What was I supposed to say? His voice rose slightly, the first crack in his calm. Every time I tried to talk to you about us, you shut me down. You told me I was being needy, dramatic, suffocating. So yeah, I started looking at my options, because I couldn't keep living in a marriage where I was the only one fighting for it. I was fighting. No, you weren't. The words came out flat and final. You were maintaining, managing, going through the motions. But you weren't fighting for us, Lena. You were fighting to keep your life exactly the way you wanted it, and I just happened to be in the background of it. The truth of it hit her like cold water. I didn't realize that's the problem. You didn't realize because you weren't paying attention. To me, to us, to what we were losing. He paused, and she heard movement like he was sitting up. Do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't the loneliness. It was the fact that you seemed perfectly happy, like our marriage falling apart didn't even register as a problem for you. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Ethan's voice cracked. Because from where I stood, you built this whole life, your friends, your routines, your hobbies, and I was just the guy who paid half the mortgage and occasionally shared your bed. When's the last time you chose me, Lena? Not because you had to, not because it was convenient, but because you actually wanted to spend time with me? Lena opened her mouth and nothing came out. She went back through the past months, searching for a moment that would prove him wrong. Came up empty. That's what I thought, Ethan said softly. So that's it? Lena's voice broke. You're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I gave up 3 weeks ago when I drafted that email. I just didn't have the guts to send it. He let out a bitter laugh. You know what's funny? I was going to do it next week. I had it all planned out. I was going to sit you down, tell you I wanted a divorce, try to make it as painless as possible. Then why didn't you? Because I'm a coward. The admission hung heavy between them. I kept thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was being too sensitive, too demanding. Maybe if I just gave it one more month, one more try, you'd wake up and remember that you married me because you loved me, not because I was a good investment. Lena's chest felt like it was caving in. I do love you. Do you? Or do you love the idea of being married? The security of it? The status? The life we built together? His voice gentled, which somehow made it worse. Because those aren't the same thing, Lena, and I can't keep pretending they are. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she loved him desperately, that she'd been a fool but she could change. But the words stuck in her throat because she wasn't sure they were true. I don't know, she whispered finally. I don't know anymore. Uepantetis. The honesty of it seemed to surprise them both. At least that's real, Ethan said after a moment. At least that's honest. What do we do now? I don't know. I need time to think, to figure out what I actually want instead of just reacting to what you don't want. How much time? I don't know that either. Lena looked around the dark kitchen at the home they'd built together and felt it all slipping through her fingers like sand. Are you coming back? Eventually, I need to get clothes, my work stuff. He paused. But I think I'm going to stay at Daniel's for a while. Give us both some space to figure out what we're doing. A separation. I guess so. Yeah. The word felt like a death sentence. Ethan, I need to go. I have an early meeting. His voice had gone professional, distant. We'll talk later, okay? Okay. Lena? He stopped her before she could hang up. For what it's worth, I'm sorry too, for not being honest sooner. For letting it get this bad before I finally said something. It's not your fault. It takes two people to break a marriage, he said. I know that, but it also takes two people to fix it, and I'm not sure we both want to do the work. The line went dead. Lena stood in her kitchen as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, holding a phone that felt like a bomb, and understood with perfect clarity that her marriage was ending. Not with screaming or affairs or dramatic confrontations. Just two people slowly realizing they'd become strangers who happened to share an address. Ethan didn't go back to sleep after Lena's call. He sat on Daniel's uncomfortable pull-out couch, watching the sun come up over the city, and felt something inside him finally break loose. He'd meant what he said to Lena. He was sorry. Sorry for not being brave enough to have this conversation months ago, before the resentment calcified into something immovable. Sorry for hoping she'd change instead of accepting who she'd become. Sorry for still loving her even though he knew he shouldn't. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Coffee before the meeting? You sound like hell. Ethan smiled despite everything. Marcus had known him since college, had been the best man at their courthouse wedding, had watched the slow deterioration of his marriage with increasing concern. Yeah. Usual place? See you at 8. Ethan showered in Daniel's cramped bathroom, borrowed a shirt that was slightly too big, and tried to make himself look like someone who hadn't just imploded his entire life. It didn't work. Marcus took one look at him when he walked into the coffee shop and swore under his breath. What happened? I told Lena I wanted space. Space or divorce. Honestly, I don't know the difference anymore. They got their coffee and found a corner table away from the morning rush. Marcus waited, patient as always, while Ethan tried to figure out where to start. She found the email I drafted to you, Ethan said finally, about the attorney recommendations. Marcus winced. How'd she take it? About as well as you'd expect. Ethan wrapped his hands around his cup, needing the warmth. We talked this morning. 3 a.m. phone call, very dramatic. And I think we're separated now, officially. Saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I'm staying at Daniel's indefinitely. Marcus studied him with the careful attention of someone who'd seen him through breakups and bad business deals and every crisis in between. How do you feel? Like I'm drowning and breathing for the first time in years simultaneously. That's because you are. Marcus took a sip of his coffee. You've been suffocating in that marriage for at least 2 years, probably longer. You noticed? Everyone noticed, man. We just didn't know what to say. Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle. You stopped being you. You stopped cracking jokes, stopped talking about anything except work and Lena's schedule. You looked exhausted all the time, like you were running a marathon in place. Ethan felt his throat tighten. I thought I was hiding it better. You were hiding it from yourself, not from the rest of us. Marcus paused. Can I ask you something? Yeah. When's the last time you were actually happy with her? Not content, not comfortable, actually happy. Ethan thought back, past the fights and the silence and the slow erosion of everything good. Our 10th anniversary. We went to that cabin upstate, spent the weekend hiking and cooking together. She laughed at my terrible jokes. We stayed up late talking about nothing. It felt like old times. That was 2 years ago. Yeah. And since then? Since then? Ethan stared into his coffee like it held answers. Since then, I've been trying to recreate that weekend. Every date I planned, every conversation I tried to start, I was chasing that feeling, but it never came back. Because you can't force chemistry, Marcus said quietly. You can't manufacture connection when one person has already checked out. She says she loves me. I'm sure she does. But loving someone and wanting to be married to them aren't always the same thing. Marcus finished his coffee and signaled for refills. My divorce almost killed me, you know that. But you know what I realized after? I'd been so busy trying to save the marriage that I forgot to ask if it was worth saving. If we were actually good for each other or just good at being together. How do you tell the difference? You feel it in your gut, in your bones. When you're with the right person, even the hard stuff doesn't feel like drowning. It feels like building something, like you're on the same team even when you're fighting. Marcus met his eyes. Do you feel like you and Lena are on the same team? Ethan didn't even have to think about it. No, I feel like I'm constantly trying to get her to join a team she never signed up for. Then you have your answer. The waitress brought fresh coffees. Ethan added cream and sugar, watching the colors swirl together, wishing his life could blend that smoothly. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I've never been divorced. Hell, I've never even been through a serious breakup. Lena was my first real girlfriend. We got married young, built our whole adult lives together. I don't know who I am without her. Then maybe that's what you need to figure out. Marcus's voice was firm but kind. Not whether you can fix your marriage, whether you want to, and who you want to be regardless of what happens with Lena. That's terrifying. Yeah, it is, Marcus smiled slightly, but it's also the most important work you'll ever do. Trust me. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two men in a coffee shop, contemplating the wreckage of their lives. The meeting, Ethan said suddenly, remembering. What's it about? The Henderson account. They're ready to sign, but they want to meet both partners first. Marcus hesitated. You up for it? Because if you need a personal day... No. Ethan straightened up, feeling something solid beneath the chaos. No, I need this. I need to do something I'm actually good at, something that doesn't make me feel like a complete failure. You're not a failure, so my marriage is falling apart. Your marriage is falling apart, Marcus agreed. But that doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing the brave thing. Walking away from something broken is harder than staying and pretending it's fine. Ethan wanted to believe him, wanted to feel brave instead of terrified. But all he felt was tired. Lena called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Her boss, Richard, sounded concerned. Are you okay? You never take sick days. Just a migraine, Lena lied, staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. I'll be fine tomorrow. Take care of yourself. And Lena, if you need to talk about anything, work or otherwise, my door is always open. She hung up, wondering if everyone had seen the cracks in her perfect facade except her. The house felt too quiet without Ethan. Too big. She found herself walking through rooms like a museum visitor, noticing things she'd stopped seeing years ago. The bookshelf in the living room was divided down the middle, her contemporary fiction and self-help books on one side, his thrillers and biographies on the other. When had they stopped sharing? The kitchen had 2 coffee makers because they couldn't agree on regular versus espresso. Separate but equal, like a divorce preview. The bedroom closet told the whole story. Her side was crammed full, color-coordinated, every inch utilized. His side was half empty, clothes pushed to one end. She'd taken over his space gradually, box by box, until he'd surrendered and moved most of his stuff to the guest room. How had she not seen what she was doing? Her phone rang. Madison. How are you? Madison asked without preamble. I don't know. Not great. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, The one she'd picked out over Ethan's objections because she liked firm mattresses and he liked soft. We talked this morning. He's staying at Daniel's. Like, permanently? I don't know. He said he needs time to think. That's good though, right? Time to think means he's not filing for divorce yet. Lena wanted to take comfort in that, but couldn't. Mads, I think I've been lying to myself about everything. What do you mean? Lena struggled to articulate the realization that had been building since 3 a.m. I've been blaming Ethan for being needy, for suffocating me, for not being interesting enough. But the truth is, I think I stopped being interested. In him, in our marriage, in trying. And instead of admitting that, I made it his fault. Madison was quiet for a long moment. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? I don't know. How do you fix something you didn't realize you broke? You start by being honest, with yourself and with him. Madison's voice softened. Lena, I love you, but Claire was right last night. You've been checked out for a while. We all noticed. We just didn't want to say anything because it wasn't our place. The words stung, but Lena couldn't argue with them. Did I ever talk about him? About us? Not really. You talked about work, about our plans, about your goals, but Ethan was just kind of background. Like furniture you'd stopped noticing. Lena closed her eyes. I'm a terrible person. You're not terrible, you're human, and humans get complacent and scared, and sometimes they sabotage good things because it's easier than doing the work. Madison paused. But you have to decide what you want now, not what's comfortable or familiar, what you actually want. Everyone keeps saying that because it's true. Do you want your marriage? Lena thought about Ethan's face when he'd walked out yesterday, the sadness in his eyes, the resignation, the way he'd smiled like his heart was breaking. Did she want him back? Or did she just want to not be the villain in their story? I want to not have messed this up so badly, she said finally. That's not the same thing as wanting him back. I know. After they hung up, Lena lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The recessed lighting had been her idea too. Ethan had wanted a ceiling fan, said it would be more practical, but she'd insisted on the modern look. She'd gotten her way. She always got her way. And now she was alone in a perfect house that felt like a mausoleum. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Jamie. I know you said not to text, but I wanted to make sure you're okay. You seemed upset last night. She'd forgotten she'd texted him from the wine haze. She stared at the message, this man who represented everything wrong with her choices. He was attractive, attentive, interested. He made her feel seen in a way Ethan hadn't in years. But he wasn't her husband, and she'd been using him, using the attention, the flirtation, the possibility of him, as an excuse to check out of her marriage. She typed back, I appreciate the concern, but please respect my boundaries. I'm working on my marriage, and that means no contact with you. I'm sorry if I led you on. That was wrong of me. She blocked the number before she could second-guess herself. It felt like closing a door she should never have opened. The Henderson meeting went better than Ethan expected. He slipped into professional mode like armor, presenting their proposal with confidence and charm. Marcus backed him up seamlessly, and by the end of the hour they had a signed contract and a partnership that would keep their firm busy for the next year. Drinks to celebrate? Marcus suggested as they walked out of the building. Rain check. I need to go home and get some things. Marcus understood. Want company? Nah, I should do this alone. The drive back to the house felt surreal. Ethan had only been gone 24 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. He parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering courage. His key was still on his keychain. He still lived here. This was still his house. So why did it feel like trespassing? He let himself in quietly, half expecting Lena to appear, but the house was silent. Lena? He called out. No answer. He found a note on the kitchen counter. Had to run to the store. Take whatever you need. L. The formality of it hurt more than he expected. Ethan went upstairs and started packing. Clothes, toiletries, his laptop, and files for work. He moved mechanically, trying not to think about what he was doing, what it meant. In the closet, he saw how much space Lena had taken, saw his shirts pushed to the corner, his shoes relegated to a single shelf. He'd given ground gradually. never complaining, until he'd been squeezed into a fraction of what should have been shared space. Was that a metaphor for their whole marriage? He packed efficiently, years of business travel making it automatic. 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of work stuff, his favorite books from the living room, the essentials of a life. He was carrying the last box to his car when Lena's SUV pulled into the driveway. They both froze. Lena got out slowly, grocery bags in hand, staring at the suitcases like they were evidence of a crime. "Hi," Ethan said. "Hi." They stood there in the afternoon sun, the space between them feeling vast and impossible. "I left you a note," Lena said finally. "I saw it. Thanks. Did you get everything you need? For now." Lena set down the grocery bags, her hands shaking slightly. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" Ethan wanted to say no, wanted to get in his car and drive away before this got harder, but he owed her this much. Okay. They ended up in the kitchen, the site of yesterday's explosion. Lena put away groceries with nervous energy while Ethan leaned against the counter, maintaining careful distance. "I blocked Jamie," Lena said abruptly. "The guy from the gym. I told him I was working on my marriage and cut off contact." Ethan felt something twist in his chest. "Okay. I know it's not enough. I know I should have done it months ago. Should never have let it get to the point where he thought we had something. But I wanted you to know." She turned to face him, her eyes red-rimmed. "I've been lying to myself about a lot of things. About you, about us, about what I wanted, and I'm sorry." "I know you are." "Do you?" Lena's voice cracked. "Because I keep thinking about everything you said, about how I built a life that didn't include you. And you're right, I did. I pushed you further and further to the edges until you were barely even there." "Why?" Ethan asked the question that had been haunting him. "Why did you do that?" Lena wrapped her arms around herself. "I think I was scared." "Of what?" "Of needing you. Of being vulnerable. Of building my whole life around someone and then having it fall apart." She laughed bitterly. "Ironic, right? I was so busy protecting myself from getting hurt that I destroyed the thing I was trying to protect." Ethan understood that logic, had lived in that fear himself, in different ways. "My parents' divorce was ugly," Lena continued quietly. "Really ugly. My mom built her entire identity around being a wife and mother, and when my dad left, she completely fell apart. I watched her become this shell of a person, lost without him." She met Ethan's eyes. "I swore I would never let that happen to me. I would never need anyone so much that losing them would break me." "And so you made sure you didn't need me?" "Yeah." The admission seemed to cost her. "I thought independence was the same as strength, that if I kept enough of myself separate, built enough of a life outside our marriage, I'd be safe if things ended." "But we never had a chance," Ethan said slowly, understanding dawning, "because you were already halfway out the door. You've been protecting yourself from a divorce you created." Lena pressed her hands to her face. I know that now. But Ethan, I don't know if I can change. I don't know if I know how to do marriage differently, to need someone without it terrifying me." "Then we're at an impasse." Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. "Because I can't be married to someone who's constantly preparing for our relationship to end. I can't live in a marriage where my wife is always holding something back, always keeping one foot out the door just in case. What if I tried? What if I went to therapy, worked on it? Would you be doing it for us?" Ethan interrupted. "Or would you be doing it because you're scared of being alone, scared of failing, scared of being the bad guy in our story?" Lena's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought." Ethan pushed off the counter, suddenly exhausted. "Lena, I don't doubt that you're sorry. I don't doubt that you care about me. But sorry isn't enough. Care isn't enough. Marriage requires more than good intentions and fear of consequences." Then what does it require?" "Choice." The word came out certain, clear. Every day, choosing each other, choosing to be vulnerable even when it's scary, choosing to fight for something instead of protecting yourself from it. He picked up his keys. "And I don't think you know how to make that choice, but I want to learn. Do you?" Ethan's question stopped her cold. "Or do you want to? Because those aren't the same thing." Lena opened her mouth, then closed it. The distinction hung between them like a wall. I need to go, Ethan said quietly. I have another meeting this afternoon. When will I see you again? I don't know. Soon, probably. We have things to figure out. He paused at the door. But Lena, I think you need to figure out who you are and what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what's comfortable or safe, what you actually want. And until you can answer that honestly, for yourself, not for me, I don't think we can fix this. He walked out before she could respond, leaving her standing in the kitchen surrounded by groceries she'd bought for a life that was disintegrating. Lena watched through the window as Ethan's car backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. Then she sank to the floor and finally let herself completely fall apart. The kitchen floor was cold and unforgiving, but Lena stayed there for nearly an hour, crying in a way she hadn't since she was a child. Not delicate tears or sniffles, full-body sobs that left her gasping and shaking, makeup running in dark streaks down her face, snot she didn't bother to wipe away. Ugly crying, the kind that came from a place so deep she'd forgotten it existed. When she finally ran out of tears, she sat with her back against the cabinet, staring at the ceiling, feeling hollowed out and strangely light, like grief had excavated something rotten she'd been carrying for years. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. Lunch this week? Haven't seen you in ages. Lena stared at the message, remembering what she'd told Ethan about her mother's divorce, about watching her fall apart when her father left, about the terror of becoming that woman, so dependent on a man that losing him meant losing herself. She'd been running from that fear her entire adult life, and she'd run straight into the thing she was trying to avoid. She pulled herself up off the floor, washed her face with cold water, and looked at her reflection. Puffy eyes, blotchy skin, hair a mess. She looked like a woman who'd just lost everything. She looked real. Her phone rang. Claire. Hey, Lena answered, her voice hoarse. Madison told me what happened. How are you holding up? I'm on my kitchen floor having an existential crisis. How do you think? This Claire's soft laugh came through the line. Fair enough. Do you want company? Actually, Lena surprised herself. Can I come to you? I need to get out of this house. Of course. I'm home all afternoon. 40 minutes later, Lena was sitting in Claire's cozy living room, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like lavender, holding a cup of tea she hadn't asked for but needed. Claire didn't push, just sat across from her, waiting with the patient stillness that made her such a good therapist. I don't know who I am without being defensive, Lena said finally, without protecting myself, without keeping score, without making sure I always have an exit strategy. She looked at Claire. How do I fix that? How do I learn to just be vulnerable? First, you have to understand why you're protecting yourself. Claire set down her own tea. You mentioned your parents' divorce. Tell me about that. Lena hadn't talked about this in years, had actively avoided it, actually. But sitting in Claire's living room with nothing left to lose, the words came easier than expected. I was 14 when my dad left. Came home from school one day and half his stuff was gone. He'd been having an affair with his secretary. Classic, right? She laughed bitterly. My mom was blindsided. She'd been a stay-at-home mom, had no career, no identity outside of being a wife and mother. And when he left, she just collapsed. What did that look like? She stayed in bed for weeks, stopped cooking, stopped cleaning, barely spoke. I had to take care of everything, my younger brother, the house, even paying bills because she couldn't function. Lena's hands tightened around her mug. I remember looking at her and thinking, I will never let a man do this to me. I will never need someone so much that losing them destroys me. So you made sure you never needed Ethan. Yeah, the realization sat heavy in her chest. I built walls, kept parts of myself separate, made sure I had my own money, my own friends, my own life. I thought I was being smart, being strong, but I was just repeating my parents' pattern in a different way. Claire leaned forward. How so? My mom gave too much, made my dad her whole world, and when he left, she had nothing. Lena met Claire's eyes. I gave too little, kept Ethan at arm's length, and now he's leaving anyway. Because who wants to be married to someone who's always holding back? Do you love him? The question should have been easy. But Lena found herself hesitating, really thinking about it. I don't know, she admitted. I love the version of him I married, the ambitious guy who wanted to travel and start his own firm and build something big. But the Ethan I've been living with the past few years, the one who's content with a stable job and quiet dinners and routine, I think I resented him for becoming that person. Even though you chose stability when you married him? What? Claire's expression was gentle but pointed. You had a courthouse wedding because you said big weddings were wasteful. You bought a house in the suburbs instead of staying in the city like Ethan wanted. You pushed him to join an established firm instead of starting his own because it was more secure. You made 1,000 small choices that prioritized safety over adventure. And then you resented him for being the safe choice you insisted on. The truth of it hit Lena like a physical blow. Oh my God! You weren't just protecting yourself from needing him, Claire continued. You were punishing him for being what you turned him into. Lena set down her tea before she dropped it. Her hands were shaking. I did that. I did all of that. Yes. So what do I do? How do I fix it? Claire sat back. I can't answer that for you, but I can ask you some questions that might help. She paused. If Ethan had stayed the ambitious, risk-taking guy you married, if he'd started his own firm, traveled constantly, prioritized career over stability, would you have been happy with that? Lena opened her mouth to say yes, then stopped. Would she have? Or would she have resented his absences, his focus on work, his willingness to take financial risks? I don't know, she said quietly. Okay, different question. When you picture your ideal life, not your ideal marriage, but your ideal life, what does it look like? Lena closed her eyes, really thinking. She saw herself successful at work, independent, surrounded by friends. She saw travel and nice things and freedom to do what she wanted. And when she tried to add Ethan to that picture, he felt like an accessory, a nice addition, but not essential. Oh, she whispered. Yeah, Claire said softly. I don't think I want to be married. The words came out barely audible, but once they were spoken, Lena felt them settle into truth. Not because of Ethan, because of me. I don't think I ever really wanted to be married. So why did you? Because it was what you did. You dated, you fell in love, you got married. It was the next step. And Ethan was good, stable. He loved me. It made sense. Lena looked at Claire, tears streaming down her face again. But I think I chose marriage because it was expected, not because it was what I actually wanted. And then I spent 12 years trying to have both, the marriage and the independence, and I just ended up destroying everything. Claire handed her a tissue. What you're describing isn't uncommon. A lot of people get married for the wrong reasons. Societal pressure, fear of being alone, thinking it's what they're supposed to want. That doesn't make it better. It makes it worse. Lena wiped her eyes. I wasted 12 years of Ethan's life because I couldn't admit I didn't want what I'd signed up for. You didn't waste them. You both grew, learned things about yourselves. Sometimes the purpose of a relationship is to teach you what you actually need. Claire's voice was kind but honest. The question is, what do you do with that knowledge now? Lena thought about Ethan's question. Do you want to learn or do you want to? She'd been so focused on saving her marriage because ending it made her the villain. But staying in it for the wrong reasons would make her something worse. I think I need to let him go, she said finally. Not because I don't care about him, because I do. And he deserves someone who wants to be married to him, not someone who's going through the motions because she's too afraid to admit the truth. That's a hard realization to come to. Yeah, Lena laughed through her tears. But you know what the worst part is? I feel relieved, like some weight I've been carrying for years just lifted, and that tells me everything I need to know. Claire smiled sadly. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that set us free. They sat in silence for a moment, Lena processing the magnitude of what she'd just admitted. How do I tell him? She asked finally. How do I explain that I've been lying to both of us this whole time? Honestly, completely, even if it hurts. Claire reached over and squeezed her hand. But Lena, you also need to forgive yourself. You didn't do this maliciously. You were scared, trying to protect yourself, following a script you thought you had to follow. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it human." Lena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She stayed at Claire's for another hour, talking through years of decisions and patterns and fears. And when she finally left, she felt lighter than she had in years. Terrified, heartbroken, but lighter. The drive home took her past the Italian restaurant Ethan had wanted to try. She pulled into the parking lot and sat there, staring at the menu posted in the window. She'd never even considered it. Had dismissed his suggestion without a second thought because she'd already made plans with her friends. How many times had she done that? Chosen anything else over him? Not because the other things mattered more, but because saying yes to Ethan felt like giving up control. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. "Can we talk? Really talk. I think I finally understand what you've been trying to tell me." She stared at it for a long moment before hitting send. The response came back almost immediately. "Tomorrow? Coffee at 10? Yes. Thank you." She drove home slowly, already rehearsing what she needed to say. The truth she'd been avoiding for 12 years. It was going to break both their hearts. But at least it would be honest. Ethan spent the evening at Daniel's apartment, staring at Lena's text message and trying to figure out what he wanted. His brother ordered pizza and put on a game, giving Ethan space to think without the pressure of conversation. "She wants to talk," Ethan said finally. "About?" "I don't know. She said she finally understands what I've been trying to tell her." He set his phone down. "I'm not sure I believe it." Daniel grabbed another slice. "What would it take for you to believe it?" "I don't know. Action, maybe? Not just words, not just promises to try harder. Actual change." Ethan rubbed his eyes. "But even if she did change, even if she went to therapy and did the work and became the partner I've been begging for, would that be enough?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, can you ever really get past this kind of resentment? Can you forgive years of feeling invisible, unwanted, like you were fighting alone?" Ethan looked at his brother. "Or does it poison everything? Even if things get better?" Daniel considered this. "My therapist used to say that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It eats you from the inside." "So what? I just forgive and forget? Pretend the past 3 years didn't happen?" "No, but you acknowledge that staying angry hurts you more than it hurts her. And you decide whether you want to build something new with her or whether too much damage has been done." Daniel paused. "But Ethan, you need to be honest about what you can actually forgive. Don't agree to try again if part of you has already checked out. That's not fair to either of you." Ethan thought about that long into the night, lying on the uncomfortable pull-out couch, listening to the city sounds through Daniel's thin windows. Could he forgive Lena? Maybe. Could he trust her again? That was harder. Could he spend the rest of his life wondering if she was going to pull away again the moment things got comfortable? He didn't know. By morning, he still didn't have answers. But he got up, showered, put on his best suit-like armor, and headed to the coffee shop. Lena was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She'd ordered his usual, black coffee with 1 sugar. The small gesture hurt more than it should have. "Hi," she said as he sat down. "Hi." She looked different. Tired, yes, but also somehow clearer, like she'd come to some kind of decision. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Thank you for meeting me," Lena said, her hands wrapped around her cup like she needed the warmth. "Of course." They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Ethan waited, letting her take the lead. "I talked to Claire yesterday," Lena started, "for hours. We went through everything, my parents' divorce, why I've been holding back, what I'm actually afraid of." She met his eyes, and I realized something I should have figured out years ago. "What's that?" "I don't think I ever really wanted to be married." The words came out quiet but clear. "Not because of you, because of me. I think I got married because it was what I was supposed to do, what came next, what made sense. But I've spent our entire marriage trying to maintain my independence, keep my own life separate, make sure I never needed you too much. And that's not a marriage. That's 2 people living parallel lives under the same roof." Ethan felt something crack in his chest. He'd expected a lot of things from this conversation: apologies, promises to change, maybe even blame. But not this. Not honesty, this brutal and complete. Okay, he said carefully. I'm not saying this to hurt you, Lena continued, her voice shaking slightly. I'm saying it because you deserve the truth. You deserve someone who wants to be married, who wants to build a life together, who isn't constantly protecting themselves from the relationship. And I don't know if I can be that person. I don't know if I even want to be. Ethan took a sip of his coffee, buying time to process. How long have you felt this way? I don't know. Years, maybe. But I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that all marriages went through rough patches, that I just needed more space and everything would be fine. She wiped at her eyes. But the truth is, every time you tried to get closer, I pulled away. Not because you were suffocating me, because intimacy terrified me. Because of your mom. Partly, but also because I think I've always valued my independence more than partnership, and I thought I could have both, a marriage and complete autonomy. But that's not how it works, is it? No, Ethan said quietly. It's not. Lena's tears fell freely now. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I'm sorry I wasted your time. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't enough. When the truth was I wasn't capable of being what you needed. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. Ethan felt his own eyes burning. This was it. The conversation he'd been avoiding for years. The truth he'd known deep down but couldn't admit. I appreciate your honesty, he said, his voice rough. I really do. But can I ask you something? Anything. Did you ever love me? Really love me, not just the idea of being married or the stability I provided. Did you ever actually love me? Lena's face crumpled. Yes. In the beginning, absolutely. You were everything I thought I wanted. Smart, funny, ambitious. You made me feel safe. But somewhere along the way, safe started feeling like settled. And I think I confused loving you with loving the security you represented. She met his eyes. I'm not proud of that. But you asked for honesty. Ethan nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me the truth. They sat in heavy silence, the coffee shop bustling around them. Two people at the end of something that had been dying for years. What do we do now? Lena asked finally. Ethan thought about the draft email to Marcus, about the months of planning his exit, about the relief he'd felt driving away from their house, about the fact that hearing Lena confirm his worst fears didn't hurt as much as he'd expected, maybe because part of him had already let go. I think we get divorced, he said quietly. I think we stop pretending we can fix something we both know is broken. Lena nodded, tears streaming down her face. Okay. And I think we try to do it kindly. No lawyers unless we have to, no fighting over things, just two people who tried and failed, dividing up a life as fairly as we can. I'd like that. Lena reached across the table, and after a moment, Ethan took her hand. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. You're a good man, Ethan. You deserved a wife who was all in. I'm sorry I couldn't be her. I'm sorry, too, for not being brave enough to have this conversation years ago, for hoping you'd change instead of accepting who you were. He squeezed her hand once, then let go. We both made mistakes. Yeah. They finished their coffee in companionable silence, the weight of 12 years settling between them. Not angry anymore, not fighting, just sad in the way endings always are, even when they're necessary. I should go, Ethan said finally. I have a client meeting at noon. Okay. Lena stood when he did. Will you let me know when you're ready to start the actual process? I'll follow your lead. Yeah. Give me a week or so to get things organized, find a place to live, figure out the logistics. Take your time. The house is paid off, so there's no rush. They walked out together, and on the sidewalk, Lena pulled him into a hug. Ethan stiffened at first, then relaxed into it. It felt like goodbye. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for trying so hard, for being patient longer than I deserved. You're going to make someone really happy someday. So are you, Ethan said, and meant it. Once you figure out what you actually want. They pulled apart, and Lena walked to her car without looking back. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, watching her drive away, and felt the strangest sensation. Peace. It was over, really over. And instead of devastation, he felt like he could finally breathe. 2 weeks later, Ethan signed a lease on a one-bedroom apartment downtown. It was smaller than the house, with older appliances and a view of another building instead of the manicured lawn Lena had insisted on. But it was his. A space he'd chosen for himself, not compromised on, not settled for. Marcus helped him move the basics: bed, couch, kitchen stuff. Daniel brought beer and pizza. "To new beginnings," Marcus said, raising his bottle. They clinked bottles, and Ethan looked around his empty apartment, filled with boxes and possibilities, and smiled. His phone buzzed. A text from Lena. "Mediation scheduled for next Thursday at 2. Mediator's info attached. Let me know if that works." He typed back, "Works for me. Thanks." The divorce was moving forward smoothly, almost too smoothly. They'd agreed to split everything 50-50, keep it simple and clean. No alimony since they both worked. No kids to complicate things. Just two people untangling 12 years as painlessly as possible. His mother had cried when he told her. His father had been quietly disappointed. His friends had offered sympathies that felt more like relief, like they'd all been waiting for this and were glad he'd finally gotten out. The only person who seemed genuinely surprised was his Aunt Linda. "You two seemed so happy at Christmas," she'd said on the phone. Ethan had laughed. "We were good at pretending." Now, standing in his new apartment, he realized he didn't have to pretend anymore. Didn't have to perform contentment or manufacture happiness or convince himself that things would get better. He could just be. "You okay?" Daniel asked, appearing at his elbow. "Yeah." Ethan meant it. "Yeah, I really am." "Good, because I'm taking you out tonight. No arguing. You need to get out, see people, remember what it's like to have fun." "Dan, not negotiable. Marcus already agreed to come. We're hitting that new bar on 5th, having overpriced drinks, and I'm going to embarrass you with stories from college." Despite everything, Ethan laughed. "Fine, but I'm not staying out late. I have work tomorrow." "Look at you, already sounding like a divorced dad." Daniel grinned. "This is going to be great." That night, sitting in a crowded bar with his brother and his best friend, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Happy. Not the performed happiness he'd clung to in his marriage. Not the desperate hope that things would improve. Just genuine, uncomplicated happiness. He was free. The realization hit him somewhere between his second beer and a truly terrible joke from Marcus. He was free from the constant anxiety of wondering if Lena would finally see him, finally choose him, finally want their marriage as much as he did. He didn't have to fight anymore. "Earth to Ethan." Marcus waved a hand in front of his face. "You good?" "Yeah." Ethan shook himself back to the present. "Sorry, just thinking. About Lena. About the fact that I don't miss her as much as I thought I would." He looked at his friends. "Is that terrible?" "That's called relief," Daniel said, "and it means you made the right choice. Or she did. Does it matter who made it? You're both getting what you need. Freedom to figure out who you actually are, instead of who you thought you were supposed to be." Marcus signaled for another round. "Besides, you're young, successful, single in the city. This is going to be good for you." Ethan wasn't sure about that, but he appreciated the optimism. His phone buzzed again. For a split second, he expected it to be Lena, but it was a notification from his calendar. Mediation, Thursday, 2 p.m. The end was coming. Official, official, legal, final. And for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't afraid of what came next. Mom. Lena spent those same 2 weeks sorting through 12 years of accumulated life. She'd stayed in the house. Ethan had insisted, said it made sense since she worked closer, but it felt like living in a museum. Every room held memories of who they'd been, who they'd tried to be, who they'd failed to become. She packed Ethan's remaining things carefully, boxing them by category. His books, his old college sweatshirts, framed photos from their early years when they'd actually looked happy together. Madison came over one Saturday to help. "How are you doing?" she asked, wrapping picture frames in newspaper. Honestly, I don't know. Lena taped up another box. I feel sad, obviously, but also relieved, like I've been holding my breath for years and finally let it out. That's normal. Is it normal that I don't miss him more? We were together for 12 years, Mads. Shouldn't I be more devastated? Madison sat back on her heels. I think you've been mourning this marriage for a while. You just didn't realize it. Lena thought about that. Maybe. They worked in silence for a while, dismantling a life box by box. Are you going to stay in the house? Madison asked eventually. I don't know. Feels too big now, too full of ghosts. Lena looked around the bedroom. We bought this place thinking we'd fill it with kids someday, but we could never agree on when, and then it just became another thing we didn't talk about. Did you want kids? I thought I did, but honestly, I think I wanted the idea of kids more than actual kids. Same way I wanted the idea of marriage more than the reality of it. Lena laughed bitterly. I'm a walking cliché. You're human. There's a difference. Lena's phone rang. Her mother. She let it go to voicemail. You haven't told her yet, Madison observed. No, I keep trying to find the right words, but they don't exist. Hey, Mom, remember how you fell apart when Dad left and I swore I'd never be like you? Well, turns out I'm exactly like you, just in reverse. I'm the one leaving. Lena shook her head. She's going to be so disappointed. Or she might understand better than you think. The voicemail notification popped up. Lena ignored it. She'd deal with her mother later. Right now she had enough to process without adding her family's judgment to the mix. By evening, they'd packed up most of Ethan's things. Lena would drop them at his new apartment next week, one final exchange before the mediation session that would officially end everything. After Madison left, Lena sat in the empty bedroom and pulled out her phone. She opened her photos, scrolling back through years of carefully curated moments. Their wedding day, just the two of them, and a judge. She looked so young, so certain. Their first apartment cramped and full of secondhand furniture. They'd been happy then, hadn't they? Vacations they'd taken, dinners they'd shared, holidays with family. When had the smiles become forced? When had the closeness become performance? She couldn't pinpoint it. The end had been so gradual, so quiet, that by the time she noticed, they were already strangers. Her phone buzzed with a text from Claire. How are you holding up? Lena typed back. Packing up my marriage, living the dream, want company? Nah, I think I need to sit with this. Okay, but call if you need me, anytime. Lena set down her phone and lay back on the bed. Her bed now, not theirs. The house was so quiet. No Ethan in the shower, no sounds of him making dinner, no background noise of him on work calls. Just silence. She should have been used to it. They'd lived like polite roommates for years. But somehow the official absence felt different. Final. She thought about what Claire had said about forgiveness. About needing to forgive herself for not being what Ethan needed. For not being honest sooner. For wasting years they could never get back. But how did you forgive yourself for hurting someone who'd only ever tried to love you? Her mother's words from years ago echoed. Marriage is work. You have to choose it every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Lena had heard it as a warning, but maybe it had been a confession. Maybe her mother had worked so hard at her marriage because she'd never been certain she wanted it either. Maybe that's why the ending destroyed her. Not because she'd loved Lena's father so much, but because she'd sacrificed herself for something that fell apart anyway. Lena pulled out her phone and finally called her mother back. Sweetheart, I was starting to worry. Her mother's voice was bright, concerned. Hi, Mom. Sorry, I've been busy. Lena took a breath. Do you have a few minutes? I need to tell you something. Of course, honey. What's going on? Lena walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn that had always felt like someone else's dream. Ethan and I are getting divorced. The silence on the other end stretched so long that Lena checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Mom? I'm here. Her mother's voice had gone thin. I don't understand. You two seemed fine at Thanksgiving. We've been good at pretending. How long has this been going on? Years, probably. We just finally admitted it. Lena pressed her forehead against the cool glass. I called because I wanted you to hear it from me before anyone else told you. Are you okay? The question surprised her. Lena had expected disappointment, maybe judgment, possibly a lecture about working harder or not giving up, not concern. I don't know, Lena admitted. I'm sad, but I'm also relieved. Does that make me a terrible person? Her mother let out a long breath. No, sweetheart. It makes you honest. I thought you'd be angry or disappointed. Why would I be angry? Because I'm doing exactly what you went through with Dad. I'm the one leaving. I'm breaking up a marriage. Lena's voice cracked. I watched what his leaving did to you, and I swore I'd never do that to someone. But here I am. Lena. Her mother's voice turned firm. Can I tell you something I should have told you years ago? Okay. Your father leaving was the best thing that ever happened to me. Lena turned from the window, sure she'd heard wrong. What? I know it didn't look that way. I know you saw me fall apart and thought I was destroyed. But, honey, I wasn't destroyed. I was terrified. There's a difference. Her mother paused. I'd spent 20 years being somebody's wife, somebody's mother. I had no idea who I was without those roles. And when your father left, I had to figure it out. It was hard and scary, and I handled it badly, especially with you kids. But it also set me free. Free? Lena sank onto the bed, trying to process this version of history. You cried for months. You couldn't get out of bed. I was grieving, not for your father. I'd stopped loving him years before he left. I was grieving for the person I thought I was supposed to be. Her mother's voice softened. I was raised to believe that being a good wife and mother was the highest achievement a woman could reach. So when I failed at that, I thought I'd failed at everything. It took me a long time to understand that I hadn't failed. I'd just been living someone else's dream. Lena felt tears sliding down her face. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because you were 14 and angry and you needed someone to blame. It was easier to let you see me as the victim and your father as the villain than to explain that sometimes marriages end because people grow in different directions. Her mother sighed. But I should have told you eventually. I should have explained that what looked like destruction was actually reconstruction. I went back to school, got my teaching degree, built a career I love. I made friends who know me as myself, not just as someone's wife. I learned to be alone without being lonely. I had no idea. I know, and I'm sorry for that, because I think watching me fall apart made you afraid of needing anyone. And that fear has been running your life ever since. The observation was so accurate it hurt. Ethan said the same thing. He's a smart man. I always liked him. Her mother paused. This divorce, whose idea was it? Mutual, I guess. But I'm the one who admitted I never really wanted to be married, so technically mine. Lena wiped her eyes. He deserved better than someone who is always holding back. And you deserve to be honest about what you want, even if it disappoints people. Her mother's voice was gentle. Lena, I love you, and I'm not disappointed. I'm proud of you for being brave enough to tell the truth before you wasted another decade pretending. Something in Lena's chest loosened. Really? Really? Marriage isn't for everyone, and that's okay. What's not okay is forcing yourself into a mold that doesn't fit just because you think you're supposed to. They talked for another hour, her mother sharing stories Lena had never heard, about the fights with her father, the loneliness of a marriage that looked perfect from the outside, the relief when it finally ended, about the years of therapy and self-discovery that followed, about learning to be happy alone. I just wish I'd figured this out sooner, Lena said as the conversation wound down, before I hurt Ethan so badly. You can't change the past. You can only learn from it and do better going forward. Her mother paused. And Lena, be kind to yourself through this. Ending a marriage is hard, even when it's the right choice. Let yourself grieve. After they hung up, Lena sat in the dark bedroom feeling like she'd just had a conversation with a stranger who happened to be her mother. All these years, she'd been running from a cautionary tale that had actually been a success story. Her mother hadn't been destroyed by divorce. She'd been liberated. Maybe Lena would be too. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. Mediation. Thursday 2 p.m. Bring financial docs. 3 days. 3 days until it became official. Lena spent those days organizing paperwork, meeting with her own lawyer just to make sure she understood the process, and gradually coming to terms with the fact that at 34 years old, she was starting over. Wednesday night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through everything that could go wrong at mediation. What if Ethan changed his mind about being civil? What if they couldn't agree on how to split things? What if seeing him made her realize she'd made a terrible mistake? At 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and went to Ethan's office. She'd been avoiding it, but now she sat at his desk, looking at the space he'd occupied for years. There was a framed photo she'd missed when packing, their first anniversary, at some restaurant she couldn't remember. They looked absurdly young, happy in a way that seemed impossible now. Ethan's arm was around her, and she was laughing at something off camera, her head tilted toward him like he was the center of her universe. When had she stopped looking at him like that? She set the photo face down, unable to bear it. In the desk drawer, she found a notebook. She should have left it alone, but exhaustion and curiosity won out. She opened it to find page after page of Ethan's handwriting, dates, ideas, plans. Date ideas for Lena. Hot air balloon ride, cooking class, weekend in Charleston, couples massage, stargazing at the observatory. He'd made lists, dozens of them. Things he wanted to do with her, conversations he wanted to have, ways to reconnect. Each one dated, some going back years. Things to talk about with Lena, her childhood, her dreams, what she wanted at 16 versus what she wants now, places she'd live if she could live anywhere. God, he'd been trying so hard, planning these elaborate attempts to reach her while she'd been too busy building walls to notice. Near the back of the notebook, dated 3 months ago, signs it's over. She doesn't ask about my day anymore. She plans her life without me. She seems happier when I'm gone. She flinches when I touch her. She's already left. She just hasn't told me yet. Lena closed the notebook with shaking hands. She thought she'd been subtle, thought she'd hidden her growing distance. But he'd seen it all. Cataloged every small rejection, every withdrawal, every sign that she was checking out. And he'd kept trying anyway. She put the notebook back exactly where she'd found it, hating herself just a little bit more. Thursday arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that matched endings. Lena arrived at the mediator's office 15 minutes early. Documents organized in a folder. Wearing a professional dress like this was a business meeting instead of the dismantling of her life. Ethan was already there, sitting in the waiting room in a suit she recognized. He looked tired but composed, scrolling through his phone with the same focused expression he used to wear reading the morning news. "Hi," she said. He looked up. "Hi." They sat in awkward silence, two strangers who'd once promised forever. The mediator, a woman named Susan Chen with kind eyes and efficient hands, called them in at exactly 2 o'clock. "Thank you both for being prompt," she said, gesturing to chairs across from each other at a conference table. "I know this process isn't easy, but you're both here voluntarily, which makes my job much simpler. Shall we begin?" The next 2 hours were a masterclass in civility and sadness. They divided their assets with surprising ease. The house would be sold, profits split 50-50. Retirement accounts, already mostly separate, stayed that way. They'd accumulated less together than Lena would have thought, 12 years condensed into line items on a spreadsheet. "What about personal items?" Susan asked. "Furniture, kitchen items, that sort of thing?" "Lena can have the house stuff," Ethan said immediately. "I'm starting fresh anyway. Just want my books, my desk, some personal things." "Are you sure?" Susan looked concerned. "You're entitled to half—" "I'm sure." Ethan met Lena's eyes. "I don't want to fight over forks." Lena felt her throat tighten. "Thank you." "There's the issue of the wedding gifts," Susan continued, checking her notes. "China from your registry, the KitchenAid mixer, various items from family and friends. Donate it," Lena said. "All of it. I don't want reminders." Ethan nodded agreement. Susan made a note. "All right. That's actually most of the major items. You've both been very reasonable, which frankly is rare." She looked between them. Is there anything either of you want to discuss? Any lingering questions or concerns? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, what about the cabin reservation? Lena had forgotten about that. 6 months from now, they'd booked a weekend at the same mountain cabin where they'd spent their 10th anniversary. A last-ditch attempt to recreate the magic, scheduled before everything fell apart. It's non-refundable, Ethan continued. Paid for already. I don't want to go alone, but it seems wasteful to just abandon it. You should go, Lena said softly. Maybe take Daniel or Marcus. Have a guy's weekend. Maybe. Ethan looked at his hands. Or maybe we could both go. Not as a couple, just as two people trying to figure out how to be friends after everything. The suggestion hung in the air like a lifeline or a trap. Lena couldn't tell which. Susan looked between them. I'd advise against that until the divorce is finalized. Emotions can be complicated during this process, and putting yourselves in an intimate setting might— It's in 6 months, Ethan interrupted. We'll be divorced by then. Legally, officially separated. He looked at Lena. I just thought, we spent 12 years together. Maybe we don't have to end it with lawyers and paperwork. Maybe we could have one conversation where we're honest about everything, say the things we didn't say, and actually part as friends. Lena's eyes filled with tears. You'd want that? After everything I put you through? You didn't put me through anything I didn't allow. Ethan's voice was gentle. We both made mistakes, and yeah, I'm angry sometimes and hurt, but I also spent 12 years with you, Lena. That has to mean something, even if it's just a decent goodbye. Susan looked dubious but didn't argue. It's your choice, obviously. I'll note the cabin reservation as resolved. You'll decide closer to the date. They wrapped up the remaining details. Susan would file the paperwork, they'd have a mandatory waiting period, then a final hearing to make it official. 6 months, maybe less if the court moved quickly. Before we finish, Susan said, I always ask divorcing couples one question. You don't have to answer out loud, just think about it. She looked at each of them. If you could go back to your wedding day, knowing everything you know now, would you still say yes? Lena and Ethan locked eyes across the table. She expected to see regret there, or anger, or accusation. Instead, she saw understanding, sadness, maybe even affection. And she knew her answer. No. She wouldn't marry him again, not because he wasn't wonderful, he was, but because she'd never been ready for marriage, and forcing it had hurt them both. She suspected Ethan's answer was the same. Susan stood, professional smile in place. I'll be in touch with the paperwork. Try to be kind to yourselves through this process. Endings are hard even when they're necessary. Toas sikamitas. They walked out together, standing under the building's awning as rain pattered down. So, Ethan said. So, this is weird. Very weird. Lena managed a small laugh. We just dismantled our marriage in 2 hours. It took longer to plan our wedding. We didn't really plan our wedding. We showed up at a courthouse. True. Ethan watched the rain. Do you regret that? The courthouse thing? Lena thought about it. No, a big wedding would have been a lie. At least the courthouse was honest. Honest about what? About the fact that I was going through the motions even then. She turned to him. Ethan, I found your notebook in your desk, the one with all the date ideas. His face colored slightly. You weren't supposed to see that. I know. I'm sorry for snooping, but I needed you to know. Those ideas were beautiful, thoughtful, everything I should have wanted. Her voice broke. I'm sorry I never appreciated how hard you tried. It's okay. It's not. You deserved someone who wanted those things, who wanted you the way you wanted them. Instead, you got someone who was already planning her exit before she even admitted it to herself. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Can I ask you something? Yeah. That night you called me at 3 a.m., you said you couldn't find the exact moment we broke. When do you think it was? When did you actually check out? Lena had thought about this a lot over the past weeks. I think it was gradual, but if I had to pick a moment, our 10th anniversary, that weekend at the cabin. Ethan looked startled. That was the last time I remember being really happy with you. I know, and that's what made it so awful. Lena wiped at her eyes. We had this perfect weekend. Everything felt right. And on the drive home, I remember thinking, I should feel more than this. I should feel grateful and happy and secure. But instead, I just felt trapped. Like I'd glimpsed what our life would be, comfortable and pleasant and utterly predictable. And I couldn't breathe. So you started pulling away. So I started pulling away. She met his eyes. Not consciously, not with a plan. I just slowly built a life that didn't need you. And by the time I realized what I was doing, the gap was too wide to bridge. Do you think we ever had a chance? Ethan asked quietly. Or was this always how it was going to end? I don't know. Maybe if I'd been braver, more honest with myself from the start. Maybe if I'd figured out I didn't want marriage before I said yes. She shrugged helplessly. But I can't rewrite history. I can only learn from it. What did you learn? That I need to figure out who I am alone before I try to be part of a pair. That independence and intimacy aren't mutually exclusive, but I didn't know how to have both. That hurting someone slowly is sometimes worse than hurting them all at once. Lena looked at him. What did you learn? Ethan considered. That you can't love someone into loving you back. That hoping for change without having honest conversations is just denial. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. He smiled sadly. And that I need to love myself enough to not beg someone to want me. They stood in silence, watching the rain, two people who'd loved each other badly, learning to let go. The cabin, Lena said finally. Do you really want me there? Or were you just being polite? I really want you there, not to try again, not to rehash everything, just to, I don't know, close the loop properly, say goodbye to who we were without all the hurt and anger. He looked at her. But only if you want to, no pressure. Lena thought about it. 6 months from now, when the divorce was final and the dust had settled. One last weekend, to be honest, to say the things they'd never said, to part as friends instead of casualties. Okay, she said. 6 months. We'll go to the cabin. Yeah? Yeah. She pulled out her phone. Put it in your calendar so you don't forget. I won't forget. But he pulled out his phone anyway, adding the reminder. June 12th, mountain cabin, closure. Closure, Lena repeated. The word felt like a promise and a threat all at once. Ethan's phone buzzed. That's Marcus. I should go. We have a thing. He paused, looking at her like he wanted to say something else. What? Lena prompted. I hope you find what you're looking for, whatever that turns out to be. He said it simply, sincerely. You deserve to be happy, Lena, even if it's not with me. The kindness of it broke something loose in her chest. You too, Ethan. You're going to make someone incredibly happy someday. Maybe, he smiled. Or maybe I'll be happy alone for a while. Figure out who I am without being half of something. That sounds healthy. Yeah, therapy's already helping. He said it casually, but Lena caught the implication. You're in therapy? Started 2 weeks ago. Seemed like a good time to work through some stuff. He shifted his weight. You might want to consider it too. Not because you're broken, just because transitions are hard. Having someone to talk to helps. I'll think about it. Good. He stepped toward his car, then turned back. Lena, for what it's worth, I don't hate you. I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just sad it didn't work out. Me too. She watched him drive away, standing in the rain until her clothes were soaked and her tears were indistinguishable from the water streaming down her face. Then she got in her own car and drove home to a house that felt emptier than ever, carrying the strange weight of relief and loss all tangled together. That night, Lena did something she hadn't done in years. She pulled out an old journal from college, from before she'd met Ethan, before she'd decided who she was supposed to be. The entries were full of dreams she'd forgotten. Travel plans, career ambitions, wild ideas about living abroad or starting a business or learning to paint. A version of herself that hadn't been afraid to want things, to take risks, to be uncertain. When had she stopped being that person? She opened to a fresh page and started writing. Things I want. Honest version. The pen hovered over paper. It should have been easy. But Lena realized she'd spent so long telling herself what she should want that she'd lost track of what she actually wanted. She started small, to travel alone, to figure out if I like my own company, to have a career I'm passionate about, instead of one that just pays well, to stop being afraid of needing people, to learn what I'm good at when I'm not performing for anyone. The list grew, honest and messy and real. And somewhere around 2 in the morning, Lena looked at what she'd written and felt something unexpected. Hope. Not hope that she and Ethan would magically fix things. Hope that maybe, finally, at 34 years old, she could figure out who she actually was. And maybe that person was someone she could learn to like. 6 months moved faster and slower than either of them expected. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in late April. No drama, no last-minute changes of heart. Just a judge's signature and a court clerk handing them each a copy of the decree that made their separation official. Ethan and Lena stood outside the courthouse afterward, holding identical manila envelopes, and shook hands like business partners closing a deal. "Well," Ethan said. "Well," Lena echoed. "I guess that's it." "I guess so." They stood there awkwardly until Ethan's phone buzzed. "Marcus is waiting. We're celebrating the Henderson account closing today." "That's great. Congratulations." "Thanks." He hesitated. "You're still okay for next month? The cabin?" "Yeah, June 12th. I have it in my calendar." "Okay, good." He started to leave, then turned back. "Lena, you look good. Different, but good." She did look different. She'd cut her hair shorter, stopped wearing as much makeup, traded her designer clothes for simpler things. Small changes that added up to someone who looked less polished and more real. "Thanks, you too." And he did. The permanent tension in his shoulders had eased. He smiled easier, looked lighter somehow, like he'd put down a weight he'd been carrying for years. They parted ways as officially divorced people, and Lena drove back to her new apartment. A one-bedroom in the city, smaller than the house, but hers in a way nothing had been in years. The house had sold quickly. She'd walked through it one last time before closing, saying goodbye to the life she'd built there. It had felt like visiting a museum of someone else's marriage. In the 6 months since mediation, Lena had done the work Claire suggested. She'd started therapy with a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Patricia Chen, who didn't let her hide behind excuses or deflection. She'd quit her high-paying corporate job and taken a position at a nonprofit that paid half as much but actually meant something. She'd gone to dinner alone, to movies alone, even took a weekend trip to Charleston alone. She'd learned that she actually liked her own company, that being alone wasn't the same as being lonely, that she'd been so afraid of her mother's fate that she'd created a different kind of prison entirely. "You spent 12 years protecting yourself from a divorce, Doctor," Chen had said during one session, "and in doing so, you guaranteed one. Fear is a terrible architect." Lena thought about that a lot, about how much of her life had been built on fear instead of desire. Fear of needing someone, fear of losing herself, fear of ending up like her mother. She'd called her mother weekly during those 6 months. Real conversations, honest ones, where they talked about their lives instead of performing acceptable versions of themselves. Her mother had shared more stories about her post-divorce life, the travel, the career, the confidence she'd built from starting over. "The thing nobody tells you about divorce," her mother had said during one call, "is that it's not an ending, it's a doorway. What you build on the other side is entirely up to you." Lena was still figuring out what she was building, but for the first time in years, the uncertainty felt like possibility instead of failure. Madison and Claire had been constants throughout. Madison brought wine and distraction when Lena needed to not think. Claire brought honesty and tissues when Lena needed to feel everything. "I'm proud of you, Az," Claire had said last week over coffee. 6 months ago, you were terrified of being alone. Now look at you, thriving." "I don't know about thriving," Lena had laughed. "More like surviving with occasional moments of actual happiness. That's called being human. Most people never get there." Now, sitting in her apartment with her divorce decree on the counter, Lena felt something she hadn't expected. Excitement. Not about the divorce itself, but about what came next. About the trip to the cabin, the conversation she and Ethan would finally have. About the possibility of parting as friends instead of casualties. She pulled out her phone and texted him. "Congratulations on being officially rid of me. And on the Henderson account. You earned both." His response came quick. "Congratulations on your freedom. Use it well." She smiled at that. Then she opened her calendar and looked at the date circled in red. June 12th, 4 weeks away. 4 weeks to prepare for the hardest conversation of her life, and maybe the most important. Ethan spent those same 6 months rebuilding himself in ways that surprised him. The divorce had gutted him initially, not because he wanted Lena back, but because it forced him to confront how much of his identity had been wrapped up in being her husband. Without that role, who was he? Therapy helped. His therapist, Dr. Robert Mills, was a former divorce attorney who'd switched careers after his own marriage ended. He understood the specific grief of watching something die slowly. "You're mourning two things," Dr. Mills had explained. "The relationship you had and the relationship you thought you'd have. That second one is often harder to let go of." Ethan had carried around a vision of his future for 12 years, growing old with Lena, maybe having kids, building a life together. Letting go of that imagined future felt like losing something that had never existed but had shaped everything he did. "So what do I do?" Ethan had asked. "You grieve it, and then you build a new vision, one that's actually about you instead of about being part of a pair." So Ethan had done the work. He'd let himself be sad, angry, relieved, confused, sometimes all in the same day. He'd stopped trying to make sense of it and just let himself feel it. He'd also started saying yes to things. Daniel's invitations to go out, Marcus's suggestions for weekend trips, opportunities at work he would have previously declined because they required too much time away from home. He went to a concert he would have hated 5 years ago and loved it. Took a pottery class on a whim and discovered he was terrible at it but enjoyed trying. Started running in the mornings, something Lena had always thought was pointless. He dated, briefly, a woman named Sarah from the gym, smart and funny and completely wrong for him. They'd gone out 3 times before mutually agreeing there was no spark. "You're still processing your divorce," Sarah had said kindly. "I can tell. You're physically here but emotionally somewhere else." She'd been right. Ethan wasn't ready to build something new. He was still taking apart the old foundation, examining each piece, figuring out what to keep and what to throw away. Work had been a lifeline. The Henderson account was thriving, and Marcus had started talking about expanding the firm, maybe bringing on a junior partner. Ethan threw himself into projects with an energy he hadn't felt in years. "You're different," Marcus observed one day over lunch. "Lighter, more like the guy I met in college." I feel different," Ethan admitted. "Like I've been holding my breath for a decade and finally exhaled." "That's called not being in a dying marriage." "Yeah. You ever regret it? The divorce?" Ethan had thought about that question a lot. "No. I regret how long it took. I regret the pain we caused each other, but I don't regret the choice." "Good. Because you deserve to be happy, man, and you weren't, not for a long time." Now, with the divorce finalized and the cabin trip approaching, Ethan felt a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. He wanted closure with Lena, wanted to understand the full story, wanted to part as friends. But he also knew that reopening everything could be dangerous. What if seeing her made him question the divorce? What if they fell back into old patterns? What if the conversation went badly and they ended up more hurt than before? Dr. Mills had addressed those fears directly. "You're not the same people who got married 12 years ago. You're not even the same people who filed for divorce 6 months ago. Trust the growth you've both done. And remember, closure doesn't mean reconciliation. It means acceptance." Ethan held on to that as June 12th approached. Acceptance. That's what he wanted. Not to fix what was broken, but to understand it, honor it, and let it go. He texted Lena 2 weeks before the trip. "Still good for the cabin? No pressure if you've changed your mind." Her response, "Still good. I think we need this." "Yeah, me too." The days leading up to June 12th felt strange for both of them. Lena found herself nervous in ways she hadn't been in months. She changed her outfit 3 times the morning of the trip, frustrated with herself for caring what Ethan thought. "It's not about impressing him," she told her reflection. "It's about being honest." She settled on jeans and a sweater, comfortable and real. Threw a bag in her car and made the 3-hour drive to the mountains, windows down, music loud, trying to quiet the anxious voice in her head. Ethan arrived first. He'd taken the day off work, made the drive in his new car, a used sedan he'd bought after giving Lena the SUV and the divorce settlement. The cabin looked exactly like he remembered, rustic, isolated, surrounded by pine trees and mountain air. He let himself in with the key they'd been given, set his bag in one of the two bedrooms, and stood on the porch waiting. Lena's car pulled up at exactly 4 o'clock, punctual as always. She got out slowly, looking around like she was seeing the place for the first time. "Hi," Ethan called from the porch. "Hi." She grabbed her bag and walked up the steps. They stood facing each other, two people who'd been married for 12 years and divorced for 2 months, and didn't know how to greet each other. Lena solved it by pulling him into a quick hug. "Thanks for suggesting this." Thanks for coming." Ethan stepped back. "I took the smaller bedroom. Figured that was fair." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." He grabbed her bag. "Come on, I'll show you around. Though you remember it, obviously." The cabin was exactly as they'd left it 2 years ago. Same rustic furniture, same view of the mountains, same fireplace where they'd made s'mores and talked about the future like it was something they'd share. Lena dropped her bag in the larger bedroom and joined Ethan in the kitchen. He'd picked up groceries on the way: coffee, eggs, bread, the basics. "I figured we could make dinner together," he said. "Like old times, if you want." "I'd like that." They moved around the kitchen with surprising ease, falling into the rhythm they'd perfected over years of shared cooking. Ethan chopped vegetables while Lena handled the pasta, neither of them acknowledging how natural it felt. "So," Lena said, as they sat down to eat, "how do we do this?" "Do what?" "The honest conversation, the closure. I've been thinking about it for weeks and I still don't know where to start." Ethan took a sip of wine. "Maybe we start with the question Susan asked at mediation. If we could go back to our wedding day, knowing everything now, would we still say yes?" Lena set down her fork. "You want me to answer that?" "I think we need to, because my answer might surprise you." "Okay." Lena took a breath. "No, I wouldn't say yes. Not because you weren't wonderful, but because I should never have gotten married in the first place. I wasn't ready. Maybe I'll never be ready, and forcing it hurt us both." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's honest. What about you?" "I would say yes." Lena looked startled. "Really?" "Yeah. Because even though it ended badly, even though we hurt each other, I don't regret those 12 years. I learned things about myself I needed to learn. I grew up. I figured out what I actually need in a partner." He met her eyes. "And I loved you, really loved you. That was real, even if it wasn't enough." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "I loved you too. I did. I just didn't know how to love you the way you needed." "I know, and that's okay. Love doesn't fix incompatibility." They ate in contemplative silence for a while, the weight of honesty settling between them. "Can I ask you something I've always wondered?" Lena said finally. "Anything." "When did you actually fall out of love with me? Not when you admitted it, but when it actually happened." Ethan thought back, tracing the timeline. "I don't think I fell out of love. I think I fell out of hope. There's a difference." "Explain." "I loved you all the way through the divorce. Probably still love you in some ways." He said it matter-of-factly, like stating a simple truth. "But somewhere around year 9 or 10, I stopped hoping you'd love me back the same way. Stopped believing we could fix it. And once hope died, the relationship was already over. We just took a few more years to admit it." Lena wiped her eyes. "I'm so sorry I did that to you, made you hope when I couldn't deliver. You didn't do it on purpose. That doesn't make it better." "No," Ethan agreed, "but it makes it human. We were both trying our best with what we knew. We just didn't know enough." After dinner, they moved to the porch with their wine glasses. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting everything gold and purple. "Tell me about the last 6 months," Ethan said. "What's been happening in your life?" So Lena told him about therapy, about quitting her job, about learning to be alone, about the conversations with her mother that had rewritten her understanding of her own history. "I think I've been running from her story my whole life," Lena said, "but I was running in the wrong direction. I thought independence meant not needing anyone. Turns out it just means knowing you can survive on your own while still choosing to let people in." "That's growth." "Yeah, painful growth. She looked at him. What about you? Ethan shared his own journey, the therapy, the dates that went nowhere, the pottery class disaster that had made Daniel laugh for days. I'm figuring out who I am outside of being a husband, Ethan said. Turns out I'm kind of boring, but in ways I actually like. I enjoy quiet mornings and terrible action movies and spontaneous road trips. I'm good at my job, but it's not my whole identity. I want kids eventually, but I'm not desperate for them. I can be happy alone. That last part is huge. It is, because I realized I stayed in our marriage partly because I was afraid of being alone. Not because I couldn't survive alone, but because I'd built my whole identity around being your partner. Losing that felt like losing myself. He turned to her. But I didn't lose myself. I found myself. Just took a divorce to get there. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, the mountain air cooling around them. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd been honest earlier? Lena asked. If I'd admitted I didn't want marriage, if you'd admitted you were unhappy. All the time. But I don't think we were capable of that honesty back then. We had to live through the slow death to understand what we actually needed. So it wasn't wasted time. No, it was expensive education. Ethan smiled. Very expensive, emotionally speaking. Lena laughed, surprised the sound came so easily. I got my money's worth in therapy bills alone. They talked late into the night, covering territory they'd never touched during their marriage. Childhood wounds and family patterns, and the stories they'd told themselves about love. The ways they'd each contributed to the breakdown, the moments they'd missed to course correct, the fundamental incompatibilities they'd tried to willpower away. I think I married you because you were safe, Lena admitted around midnight. Not boring safe, emotionally safe. You were steady and kind, and I knew you'd never leave me the way my dad left. But I used that safety as a shield instead of a foundation. And I married you because you were everything I thought I was supposed to want, Ethan countered. Beautiful, successful, independent. I didn't stop to ask if what I was supposed to want matched what I actually wanted. What do you actually want? Ethan considered. Someone who chooses me every day, not out of obligation or fear of being alone, but because being with me makes their life better. Someone who wants the partnership as much as I do. He looked at her. What about you? Honestly, I don't know if I want a partner at all. Maybe eventually, but right now I want to build a life that's entirely mine. No compromises, no negotiations, just me figuring out what makes me happy. She paused. Does that make me selfish? No. It makes you honest. And honest is better than the alternative. The night air grew cold enough that they moved inside, building a fire in the fireplace and settling on opposite ends of the couch with blankets. Remember our 10th anniversary here? Lena said, watching the flames. I told you that was when I knew it was over for me, but I never explained why. You don't have to. I want to. She pulled the blanket tighter. We had this perfect weekend. You'd planned everything, the hiking, the dinners, even brought that expensive wine I liked. And you looked so happy, like you'd finally gotten back the connection you'd been chasing. And all I could think was, this is as good as it gets, and it's not enough for me. That must have been terrifying. It was, because you were doing everything right, being everything a woman should want, and I still felt empty. She looked at him. That's when I knew the problem wasn't you, it was me. I just couldn't admit it. What changed? What made you finally admit it? You walking out, you forcing my hand. Lena's voice broke slightly. I needed you to stop trying, stop hoping, stop making it possible for me to keep lying to myself. Your giving up saved us both years of suffering. Ethan felt the truth of that settle in his chest. I wish I'd done it sooner. Me too. But we did it. That's what matters. They stayed up until nearly 3 a.m, excavating their marriage with the kind of honesty that was only possible now that it was over. No blame, no defensiveness, just two people trying to understand what had happened and why. When they finally went to their separate bedrooms, Lena felt lighter than she had in years. Not happy exactly, but unburdened, like she'd been carrying a confession for a decade and finally spoken it aloud. She fell asleep thinking about Ethan's words. Love doesn't fix incompatibility. It was the saddest truth she'd ever learned, and somehow also the most freeing. Morning came with coffee and silence that didn't need filling. They made breakfast together, ate on the porch, watched the mountains emerge from the morning mist. "I'm glad we did this," Ethan said eventually. "Me too." "Do you feel like we got closure?" Lena thought about it. "I think so. Not in a neat, tied up with a bow way, but in a honest, messy, real way. Yeah, that feels right." They spent the morning hiking the same trail they'd done 2 years ago. The conversation flowed easier now, touching on lighter topics, work and family and friends, plans for the future that didn't include each other but didn't exclude friendship either. "I hope we can actually be friends," Lena said as they reached the summit. "Not fake friends who see each other out of obligation, but real friends who genuinely care about each other." "I'd like that. But it might take time. Space first, then friendship." "How much space?" "I don't know. A few months, maybe. Let the dust settle. Let both of us fully move on." Ethan looked at the view spread before them. "But, yeah, eventually I think we could be friends. We were friends once, before everything else." "We were, weren't we?" Lena smiled at the memory. "I'd forgotten that." On the hike back, Lena tripped on a root and Ethan caught her elbow, steadying her. The touch was casual, friendly, and for the first time it didn't hurt. Didn't make her feel guilty or confused or sad. It just felt like one person helping another. They packed up that afternoon, moving through the cabin one last time. "Weird to think this is probably the last time we'll be here," Lena said, looking around. "Maybe. Or maybe in 10 years we'll come back as actual friends and laugh about all this. I hope so." They loaded their cars and stood in the driveway, delaying the final goodbye. "Thank you," Ethan said, "for being honest, for doing the hard work over the past 6 months, for coming here and having these conversations. Thank you for suggesting it, for being kind even when you had every right to be angry, for," Lena's voice caught, "for loving me even though I couldn't love you back the right way." "Hey." Ethan pulled her into a hug, and this time neither of them pulled away quickly. They stood there in the mountain air holding each other like the friends they used to be and maybe someday would be again. "You did love me, just not the way either of us needed, and that's okay. We're both going to be okay." "Are we?" "Yeah." He pulled back, meeting her eyes. "We are. Because we did the hard thing. We told the truth, and now we get to build whatever comes next." Lena wiped her eyes. "When's the next time I'll see you?" "I don't know. When it feels right. No pressure, no timeline." "Okay." She got in her car, then rolled down the window. "Ethan, I really am sorry for all of it. I know, me too. But I'm also grateful for what we had, even if it didn't work out." "Me too." She drove away first, watching him disappear in her rearview mirror. And this time, instead of grief, she felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for the marriage itself, but for the ending. For the honesty it had forced, the growth it had required, the person she was becoming because of it. Ethan stood in the driveway for a long time after Lena left, breathing in the mountain air, feeling the weight of 12 years finally lift off his shoulders. Then he got in his car and drove back to his life, ready to see what he could build now that he wasn't building it for two. 3 months later, Lena stood in her apartment looking at a job offer from an organization in Seattle. It would mean leaving everything familiar, starting completely over in a new city where she knew no one. The old Lena would have been terrified. This Lena was terrified too, but also excited. She called Claire first. "I think I'm going to take it," Lena said. "Good. You should. You'll be great there." "What if I'm making a mistake?" "Then you'll make a mistake and learn from it. That's called living." She called her mother next. "I'm proud of you," her mother said simply. "Go build something amazing." She almost called Ethan, then stopped herself. They texted occasionally over the past 3 months. Friendly check-ins, nothing heavy. But this felt like crossing a line. They weren't at that place yet where she'd call him with big life news. Maybe someday, but not yet. She accepted the job offer and spent the next month preparing to move. Madison threw her a goodbye party that turned into an honest accounting of their friendship. I was a terrible friend during my marriage, Lena admitted over wine. I only called when I needed something. I never asked about your lives. I was completely self-absorbed. Yeah, you were, Madison agreed. But you're different now. Better. More present. I'm trying. That's all any of us can do. The night before the move, Lena did something she'd been putting off. She texted Ethan. I'm moving to Seattle. New job, new start. Wanted you to hear it from me. His response came an hour later. That's amazing. Congratulations. You're going to kill it there. Thanks. How are you? Good. Really good, actually. Dating someone. Nothing serious yet, but good. Lena felt a pang. Not jealousy exactly, but something close to it. The knowledge that he was moving on in concrete ways while she was still figuring out how to be alone. But underneath that, she felt happy for him. Genuinely happy. That's great. I hope she knows how lucky she is. We'll see. Early days. But Lena, thank you for everything, including the ending. Same. Take care of yourself, Ethan. You too. She stared at the exchange for a long time before putting down her phone. That was probably the last real conversation they'd have for a while. And that was okay. They'd said what needed to be said, done what needed to be done. Now they both got to find out who they were supposed to be all along. 6 months after that, Ethan sat in a coffee shop on a Sunday morning, reading the paper and enjoying his own company. His phone buzzed with a text from his girlfriend, Amy. They'd been dating for 4 months, taking it slow, building something that felt healthier than anything he'd known before. Still on for dinner tonight? Absolutely. Can't wait. He smiled at the simplicity of it. No games, no second guessing, no wondering if she actually wanted to be there. Just two people who enjoyed each other, choosing each other, building something real. His phone buzzed again. A different number, one he hadn't heard from in months. You're not going to believe this. I'm getting married. Ethan stared at the message, confused, until the next one came through with a photo. Lena's mother, beaming, holding hands with a man Ethan didn't recognize. Then Lena's message. She said if she could do it at 62, I can figure it out eventually. Thought you'd appreciate the irony. Ethan laughed out loud, drawing looks from nearby tables. He typed back, That's incredible. Tell her congratulations from me. Will do. How's life? Good. Really good. You? Same. Seattle's amazing. I'm amazing. Found out I'm actually pretty great on my own. I could have told you that. Yeah, but I had to learn it myself. They texted back and forth for a few minutes, easy and warm, the conversation of actual friends. And when it ended, Ethan felt nothing but genuine happiness for her. She'd found what she was looking for. So had he. Sometimes the end of something was really just the beginning of everything else. That night, over dinner with Amy, Ethan told her about Lena. Not everything, but enough. About the marriage that had ended, the closure they'd found, the friendship they were building. Does it bother you, he asked, that I still care about her? Amy considered. No, because you're not in love with her. You're just grateful for what she taught you, and that's healthy. What did she teach me? That you can survive losing someone you love, that you're strong enough to walk away when something isn't working, that you know what you actually need instead of what you think you should want. Amy reached across the table, taking his hand. And those lessons made you the person sitting across from me right now, so no, it doesn't bother me. It makes me grateful too. Ethan squeezed her hand, feeling the truth of it settle warm in his chest. The marriage hadn't worked, but that didn't mean it had been a failure. It had taught him how to be honest, how to ask for what he needed, how to recognize incompatibility and walk away with kindness, how to grieve something while also being grateful for it. Those were lessons worth 12 years. Somewhere in Seattle, Lena sat on her apartment balcony with a glass of wine, looking at the city lights and thinking about the same thing. She'd spent so long being afraid of becoming her mother that she'd missed the actual lesson. Her mother hadn't been destroyed by divorce. She'd been liberated by it. And now, at 62, she was brave enough to try again because she finally knew who she was. Lena wasn't ready to try again. Might never be. But she was okay with that now. She pulled out her journal, a habit she'd maintained from that first night 6 months ago, and started writing. Things I've learned. You can love someone and still not be right for them. Marriage isn't for everyone, and that's okay. Being alone is different from being lonely. The scariest thing you can do is tell the truth, but it's also the most freeing. Your parents' story doesn't have to be your story. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you love is let them go. She paused, pen hovering over paper, then added one more line. And sometimes what looks like an ending is actually a beginning, for both of you. Lena closed the journal and looked out at her new city, her new life, her new self. She thought about Ethan, probably in his own apartment with his new girlfriend, building something that actually fit who he was. They destroyed each other slowly over 12 years. But in the rubble, they'd both found something worth keeping. Themselves. Not perfect, not undamaged, but honest, whole, and finally free to build lives they actually wanted instead of lives they thought they were supposed to want. It wasn't the ending either of them had imagined when they'd stood in that courthouse 12 years ago, young and hopeful, and so certain they had it all figured out. But it was the ending they both needed. And sometimes that's the only kind of happy ending that matters. Not the one where everyone stays together, but the one where everyone becomes who they were meant to be all along, even if it means becoming it apart. Lena raised her wine glass to the city, to her future, to the woman she was finally brave enough to be. And somewhere 3,000 miles away, Ethan did the same, toasting the life he'd built from the ashes of everything he'd lost. Two people who'd almost lost themselves in each other, finding themselves by letting go. That was the real story. Not the marriage that failed, but the people who survived it, learned from it, and became better because of it. And in the end, maybe that was enough.